Okay, welcome everyone to Virgo, the archetype of Virgo. I'm looking forward to talking about this because it's obviously because it's Virgo season, and Virgo is such an interesting archetype for us, and it just really touches on some very that whole idea of the judge, our inner judge. So we'll be talking about that. But before I get started, I have to make a couple of my announcements. So I have two more master classes that I'm going to be doing, and then we'll have completed the whole archetypal astrology wheel as far as the signs go. And so we have Libra next, and then Scorpio. So I'm going to go back to Saturday. And Scorpio, or excuse me, Libra will be on September 28th, Saturday at 11 a.m. And then on November 19th, Saturday at 11 a.m. will be Scorpio, and that'll be the final sign that we'll be going over, and we'll have gone through all of them, which has been it's been a lot of fun for me to go back over these and just really dive into what these archetypal meanings are and how they show up for each of us in our lives, and how we navigate this as part of our spiritual path. And I always like to look at the astrology, the astrology signs from the archetypal perspective, so that we don't get so focused in, like, what's my sun sign, okay, this is what I am. It's like, no, we're all of these, we're all of these energies, right? So that's what's the beauty of doing this type of thing, in my opinion, is to just really be able to see that for ourselves. So as I sent out in the email, Virgo is the Virgin. And I'm going to add to that as well that Virgo also has a very deep desire. It's part of its walk on this planet is to serve. I mean, we all have that, but Virgo definitely can be the servant archetype. It really has just that strong connection to service. And Virgo is an earth sign. Okay. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that it's very connected to everything that is more of the five sensory world, in terms of looking at Virgo from a very like personality perspective, or from the perspective of, okay, so how does Virgo like to navigate life, and what is that with that earth sign? So Virgo, this is a really good like mantra for Virgo and for each of you. So it's about being an agent of good form that supports the sacredness of life. So let me explain what that could mean. Actually, what it can mean in this arena. So what came up when I was writing those notes was, I was thinking about how, like, for example, pornography. Like, pornography is an epidemic. I'm not saying that, oh, nobody should ever look at that, that it should not exist. But what has happened is that the sacredness has been so much taken out, of sex, that we have this epidemic of pornography. So we have totally, like, what's a good word to say, that the form, the whole action, the connection of sexual connection, like the sacredness has been taken out of it. I mean, that's why we have not just the epidemic of pornography, but the trafficking, right? Human trafficking, sex trafficking, that sort of thing. And so I just wanted to give that as an example, because I think it's a pretty intense example, but it really speaks to being an agent of good form. So just sit with that for a moment. Just let that just permeate, and say, okay, if I do a quick scan of my own life, and just examine, like, in what area of my life am I bringing good form that supports the sacredness of life? Or what areas in my life can I bring better form that supports the sacredness of life? And that can be something as simple as, like, the reverence for nature, right? Like, where do we bring reverence into our lives? Where do we bring and support the sacredness of whatever it is that we're interacting with? Like, that would be considered to be good form. Does that make sense? Tracking that? Okay. Okay. So when I talk about Virgo at first here, I'm going to talk about it from a very basic perspective of like, yeah, so what is the sign of Virgo? Let's just talk about it from the archetypal perspective. So it's symbolized by the Virgin. Now, virginity is, I'm going to take it out of the context of sex because I want to go deeper with that. But virginity, it was a term of strength and power and independence. And it was used actually to describe the archetype of the goddesses who were immune to the temptations of the seduction of the ego. So virginity actually can also equate to our sovereignty, not being owned by another, not being owned by no one. It's a sense of purity. I cannot be touched. I cannot be owned. I cannot be bought. Like, that's powerful. So that's one way this Virgonian virgin archetype shows up in our life is, where have we given ourselves in ways that has not felt in an honorable way, or where we have not honored the sacredness of our own self, of our own sovereignty, where we have felt maybe seduced, right? Because that's the word that I used here, where we have felt seduced by like other temptations. So that's a piece right there for us to examine in our own life. Like, where are we seduced by the ego of our own ego? Okay. So here's the other piece about Virgo, which I find so fascinating as well, is Virgo is the archetype of systems. Okay. It's a bit of an artist too. Virgo energy is a bit of an artist archetype, but it loves systems. And this is where the whole concept of the judge can come in. And let me tie this in for you. Hi, Paul. Like, it comes in as Virgo loves systems. They love to get to create systems. Virgo loves to understand how things work and how to perfect them. And so one of its characteristics is discernment, the ability to discern, which can be in its shadow can look like judgment. Okay. And so, like, when I talked about this sense of purity and good form, so for example, the archetype of Virgo can say, oh, I can see how this system has been created. And I'm also able to see how I can refine it. That's another really important word. How can I refine this to make this work more efficiently? How can I refine this to bring better form to it? And so in shadow, that can look like, oh, that was not good enough. Oh, it's not enough. It could feel almost like a black hole that never feels satisfied because it's always trying to make it better. And sure, like, that's part of a process for us, right? Always wanting to refine something. But when we're in shadow of it, then we're at the effect of it, and then we're in victim of it. So this archetype here of the systems, it's also like the engineer of the chart. Like, this earth energy is the engineer that's able to look at the like what's wanting to be created, what's needing to be created, and find a way to make it happen. That is the beauty of how this archetype can operate. So it goes back to the agent of good form that supports the sacredness of life. And so where we have to be careful is not to get caught up in that perfectionism. And this is where, like, when we're feeling that perfectionism energy, like, this is the archetype that really gets this going. It's like, oh, I got to get it perfect, or or like this feeling of this not enoughness, right? And if many of you maybe have been in relationships with people, or you yourself have been that way, to where is it ever enough? Like your partner can feel like, is it ever enough? Or you yourself can feel like, is it ever enough? And what I've come to learn about that is that if I'm having that conversation in my head with a partner or someone in my life, I know that that's just my own reflection. That is truly my own reflection of my own idea, insecurity, battle with my own, am I enough? Another aspect of this archetype is that this is where we develop like our discipline and our habits, our hobbies. This is where we be in the systems analysts of the chart. This whole idea of systems and disciplines and habits and hobbies, like that all ties into that. And so what we get to look at in that creating of disciplines and habits and hobbies is, I'd say more than anything, is our relationship to the mind body spirit balance. And this is a big aspect of Virgo energy, is how balanced is my life? How does my lifestyle, does it reflect what feels most important to me, right? Does it reflect a nice balance with my mind, as I said, my body and my spirit? And so if not, like, how can I change some of my habits? What kind of new disciplines can I initiate into my life in order to create that balance? And so on the other side of the imbalance could also be this feeling of chaos. And this is the other thing of this archetype, is it's also the ruler of organization and chaos simultaneously. Because what we know is that chaos is the prequel to transformation. Okay. And just from the personality perspective of, I don't know if any of you are familiar with any Virgos in your life, but my experience with a Virgo is that they can be super organized. And then, like, you can go into their closet and it's a chaotic mess. So there's like these kind of compartmentalization of energy with this particular archetype, because they do like to compartmentalize, and compartmentalizing can be very organized, but some aspects not. So that's been a really interesting observation that I've made, and people that I know in my life, of seeing how always kind of maybe put together that they look. And then I go over and then they open a closet and I'm like, whoa, okay, this is where your chaos shows up. So this is part of this Virgo energy of this archetype. It's like, okay, how can I bring a more refined balance, good form to my life? Can some of you relate to that? So, do we have any Virgos here in the house, though, now that we're talking? Oh, Leslie. Yeah. Okay. Right on. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have Virgo, all of us have Virgo in our chart somewhere. So I think that all of us can relate to some of this. And, for some people, when it gets extreme, it can go into like like kind of more the OCD, compulsive, always having to have things lined up, like completely lined up, and that sort of thing. And it is like an extreme of keeping quote unquote good form. Um, okay. So what else should we could tackle here? All right. So actually, let me no, I'm going to keep going before I jump into the questions, okay? Because now I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit with Virgo. And I always like to start out by describing these archetypes from a very, let's say, a more mundane level of like how you can relate to them in everyday life and how they interact with like our personalities, that sort of thing. But now I'm going to go to more of the esoteric meaning of what Virgo is and the journey of Virgo on the spiritual path. And so let's just look at the concept of like universal consciousness, God, life, universe, whatever word you like to put in there, just go ahead and slip in. But what I'm talking about here is the the unity of it all, right? That we are creation, God is creation. We're not separate from God. We are not separate from universal consciousness, that we're all one, unity, okay? And what is said, and this is based, what I'm sharing is based on a philosophy called theosophy. And in theosophy, and this is where I studied the esoteric part of astrology, and this is the journey of the soul. And what is said is in theosophy is that, of course, we are not separate from universal consciousness, that we are all a beam of light, and we are all a beam of light from that one universal consciousness, and that we are all the divinity that we seek. And it is said that before creation of all of us can exist, that it becomes that there's the two parts of creation. And I've talked about this before in, I think it was with Pisces that I might have spoken about this before, but it's about the cosmic father and the cosmic mother, which is the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And then just as a review, the cosmic father is about purpose and will. It's how to put things in motion. Excuse me. So how we go about of putting things in motion is a product of the cosmic father. And the cosmic mother, which is the divine feminine, is the vibration of the innate intelligence. It's the knowingness of the thoughts, the information. It's like all planes of consciousness are the mother, are the divine feminine. And so the combination of both of these create this balance, right, within ourselves. And that's part of what we're all, I'm going to say that we're all like really striving for, and not only just individually, but collectively, because that's part of the struggle that we're in right now, that we are in, some shadow feminine and definitely some shadow masculine energy. Okay. And so, just an example, like the experiencing the intelligence of the cosmic mother would be like, let's say you break your arm, okay, and you get it reset, but that healing, that mending of the bone is the intelligence of the divine mother. It's the intelligence of the divine feminine, of the cosmic mother. Okay, your intuition, cosmic mother. Wisdom, same thing. So they both have to work together, right? Because we can have all the intelligence to create something and to create it, but we need the will and the purpose of the masculine in order to put it into motion. So these two energies work together. And so what that becomes is the balance of life, the balance of nature. And that becomes like the balance within ourselves. And that's where this idea of what I said earlier is the agent of good form that supports the sacredness of life. And that is part of our inner journey, is to be able to create that balance within ourselves and to create that and bring that good form for the sacredness of life. So why is this so important? Well, obviously it's so important, especially right now with what's happening for us collectively, is like, this is how we can bring things into balance, because the other part of this Virgo archetype is it rules ecosystems. That's one of the characteristics, ecosystems. And you're an ecosystem, I'm an ecosystem. The whole of out here, right? The natural world is part of an ecosystem. And so what we're struggling to do is to find that balance within ourselves with the masculine and the feminine. And so that's the part of the beauty here of this Virgo archetype, is that is exactly what this is bringing about. And so one can say, well, okay, then how does this piece of the perfectionism come in, right? Like that, and that's part of how our personality initially is dealing with how to create and what is considered to be good form or not good form, and that's really not a judgment. Like there's no judgment, there's no room for judgment in that, right? Because we know that when we are creating with the intention of love and kindness and all that is good in integrous, that is good form. Okay, and that's what's powerful. And when back in I'm sorry, I'm not getting my years right here, of when one of the presidents that was elected into office, who is now one of the persons running for office. So when that person won the election, I received a article from a colleague, and the article was it was called The Return of the Black Madonna. And I never really heard of the Black Madonna. And it was written by Matthew Fox. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Matthew Fox, but he writes some pretty, powerful, just powerful words and articles. And so what he spoke about in the end is that part of what is going to help heal the shadow of what's happening for us, of not only just America but humanity, was about the beauty and what the artist archetype can bring to humanity. And I thought that was like, it really struck me, and I was like, wow. And so as I was writing these notes for this, like all that came up again for me, because that is about good form, right? And we're all artists and we're all creators, right? And so it's not necessarily about like what you're creating in terms of something physical, but what you're creating every time something comes out of your mouth, right? Is it in good form? And it all ties in, right? It all ties in. And so being able to be as congruent and balanced as we can with ourselves and what we know to be in right relationship with ourselves and others, like that changes everything for us. So I want to pause for a moment because I do want to go over the questions, and I'd love to hear from you, and just know what's coming up, and if you want to answer any of these questions, I'd love to hear what you have to share. So I'm going to go ahead and read the questions, because a couple people just popped on and I don't know if they have the questions in front of them. So the first one is, how do you handle criticism and feedback? The second one, how do you balance perfectionist tendencies with the accepting of others' differences? What does purifying your personality entail so your soul can shine through? Now, I purposely worded that way instead of making it sound so simple, because I really wanted to invite you to look at that. What does purifying your personality, which means how you interact, how your ego interacts with the world, and I'm not necessarily saying shadow ego, I'm just saying the ego, so that your soul can shine through. Like, what's in the way in your personality that is keeping your soul from shining through? So I'd love to hear from any of you who want to share, and I'm going to actually cut and paste those questions again in the chat. There we go. So for my new people that came on, hi Maggie, and there's another Zoom person, I don't know who it is. So if you want to unmute yourself, I'd love to hear what you want to share, please. Nobody? Carol? Oh, I don't know, you were unmuted, so I just like said, Carol.
I'm muted.
Okay. Nobody has any comments? Go ahead, Leslie. Thank you.
Well, for the first question, many times I don't handle criticism very well. And I usually, if somebody does say something, I'll say, okay, correct me on something. Okay, thank you, thank you. But in my head, I'm very hard on myself. And I feel like I'm not good enough then, or not handling this thing the right way. And if somebody else makes a mistake, or I have to correct somebody, I don't think a thing of it. I mean, we're all human. But when it's me, I'm very hard on myself. I know it's too hard. So
Yeah. So
not all the time. Not all the time. I don't.
okay.
It depends on the situation.
Yeah. So your inner judge comes up.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, well, you just shared it, and I think that's I appreciate your vulnerability with sharing that, because so many times that ties into something that threads deeper of and I'm not saying this about you, Leslie, but sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to be seen as wrong, right? I don't want to seem like I don't know, right? Because then that becomes a vulnerability. Yeah.
Sure, I can relate to that.
Yeah, I can too.
And I don't know where it comes from. I really don't.
Yeah,
because I was raised like I wasn't raised with a lot of criticism. I was corrected and disciplined, but I wasn't considered, I didn't have a lot of criticism about my thoughts or anything. So I don't know where that comes from.
Well, it comes from, I think, when I'll get you, Leslie, in just a sec. It comes from this, like this archetypal wound of like, am I enough? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all go down to that place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leslie.
Yeah, I was just going to say it comes from being a Virgo. I am, everyone will tell me I'm my own worst critic. And that's kind of where I live. I try to preclude any criticism coming from outside. It probably happened when I was working, but not now. But I was smiling and almost laughing while you were describing Virgo and the systems, because I love to create systems. I had no idea it was, so instrumental in Virgo. And this whole year has been, since I've retired, been trying to create order and systems and routines and habits in my life, because it was chaos for a while, and I didn't live well with that. Neither did my cat. So we were aligned in wanting me to find systems and make order out of the chaos. And I'm pretty well, yeah, I'm pretty well on my way. And the housekeeper was here Saturday, and so everything is neat and tidy and clean. And so I'm a very happy Virgo this week, and keeping things in order. But when I get into the middle of a project, it turns to chaos. I seem to work through things in a chaotic way, and then emerge from the other side. But I really like that we are let's see, agent of good form in the sacredness of life. I really like that as a way of thinking about myself. Because I definitely have not judgment so much, but a desire to have things be more sacred and more sanctity and more good in life. So, and I could see the balance between, you know, striving for the balance between the masculine and the feminine. Yeah. So anyway.
Leslie, thank you for that example because of everything what you said, because you described exactly what I was referring to when it comes to that chaos to order, right? And then order to chaos. And so because chaos is the prelude to transformation, and you just said you're retired. I know that your cat passed as well. And so like this whole transformation of your life is happening. And so then in comes the chaos, right? Because that's the whole part of the process of being in the chrysalis of the transformation process. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that was a perfect example of what I was describing for that Virgo, and the systems piece too. So you're creating a whole new system, right? Like you don't know what that system is. That's part of the discovery, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Linda, were you going to say something?
I'm like Leslie. I'm really hard on myself, and I do not take criticism well. It depends on if it's professional related or it's from family members. I get defensive about if I get criticized from family members, whereas professionally, I took it really personally, and I always question my value, you know, with myself or as part of the workplace, part of the team. And I'd always wondered if I belonged there because I never felt adequate, even though on the outside, people, you know, treated me like I belonged there, stuff, but inside I did not. And I'm not a Virgo, I'm a Libra, but I see a lot of Virgo tendencies in my personality, a lot. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And because as I said, like each one of these archetypes, each one of these signs are all part of what we all can relate to, whether it's, you know, the over like a big theme in our life where it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly like Leslie was able to describe that about herself being a Virgo, but yet we all can relate to that. And as I said earlier about that piece of perfectionism, like that I'm not enoughness, right? And that constant striving to reach that, like that can be such a like a place of unfulfillment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like at what point do we arrive? Like I don't know, it's like a continuum, like we arrive and yet we continue, right? So it's always moving, but then be able to like sit there and go, yeah, like look what I've done, look what I've accomplished, or you know,
Right.
whatever it may be for us. Yeah, to
Yeah.
bask in that glory. Yeah,
Exactly. Never
yeah,
enough. We're
yeah,
always striving, you know.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Yeah, Heidi.
I just returned from vacation, and when I was on vacation, I saw someone that I see maybe once or twice a year. However, that person is very important to me. I sat at a table maybe 5 feet, and I was given an opportunity to be reminded of, or to be criticized, but in a gentle way, of something that I had done. And maybe this has happened to all of you before. You type a note, a text note, and you send it, and then you realize it's gone to the wrong person. I don't know, has that ever happened to you? Right? It's like horrifying. Um, and that what was sent in that note was not anything negative. It was nothing about that particular person, but it was something about that particular person's life. And I violated a trust when I did that. And it's been a year for that person to then say something to me about it. And so I've had the opportunity to become defensive or to sit back and go, oh my God, thank you. And it was not meant as a criticism, but it was meant as a reminder to be careful of what comes out of our mouths or onto our fingers on the laptop. It was a real gift in my life. Hard one, but it was a gift.
Wow. Yeah.
It was a wow moment.
Yes.
It was a wow moment because it was a recognizing in that moment what I needed to do with my future self.
Yes. Yeah, you know what else came up too, because I can relate to that of being told something that I just got told. And I mean that from a wet place of like, yeah, I should have got told. And it's like, who, what am I going to do with that? Because it's like it totally triggers a like some kind of defensive, right? It can trigger some kind of defensive response for us. And whoa, am I going to take that into my body and like feel it? Am I going to hold it like, no, can't go in, not going in, got to defend that, got to protect it, right? Like there's this whole thing that happens in that moment. And yeah, that's super powerful.
It
That is,
was super powerful. It still
yeah.
is.
Yeah. And then if we can allow that to be and to allow that to be heard, and then it's really quite remarkable, right? Like, can you describe like what you felt like afterwards, like in your body energetically?
Energetically, I felt like someone really cared enough about me. I felt very special. I felt like I wasn't being lied to or carried along, or you know how sometimes we placate or do whatever. It just felt a very humbling and powerful moment because it was an opportunity. That's the only way I could look at it, as an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for that. Beautiful. Yeah, Paul.
Whatever it is. I remember being a school teacher and getting evaluated. Well, I hated those days. Principal would come in, vice principal would come in, sit down, writing, like taking the driver's test. Oh my God, oh my God. And I'm trying to be relaxed and be myself. And hey, guys, it's going to be a great day. And do my whole, teaching thing. And then I think it's finally done. But then it would be come into the office. I'm going to offer you some feedback. And when I hear that, it's like, ew, it would grate on me. It's like, so what did I do wrong? It's like what's going on in my head, I think because of my own wounding. And I think everybody has the wounding somewhere in their life. So I'm not going to beat myself up too much. So I have a little bit of that. But I talked to other teachers about getting the feedback from the evaluations. And they would say, well, look, first, is it true? Is it justified? What's it say? Well, he said I should use more models and kind of show what a good paper looks like and maybe take the name off. Like, oh, that's a good idea. Said, yeah, it is. But it kind of hurt when it was first offered. I say, so if it's true, if it's good, then start incorporating the stuff that I think will work. Then there were times the same teacher said, but there are times the principal will tell you something that is pure BS because he's never taught an English class in his life. And it's like, what I would do is blah, 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 and try this. And so what you do as a teacher, you go, oh, just say, thank you. I'm going to try that out. And so next time you see the principal, he said, hey, how'd that work out? What you say is, oh, I really like your suggestion. It worked out really good. So they know that they're the boss and you can still go on doing what you need to do. You just kind of let it not bother. Well, I did learn to let it not bother me so much if it didn't apply. But if it did, it's like, I need to learn how to incorporate these things. And on the flip side, as a teacher, I would kind of, knowing that I hated criticism, offering my own, can I show you something? I would use soft language to my students to kind of encourage them to do things a little better. And sometimes they felt criticized and I say, oh, I'm sorry. We'll come back to that later. Just give them space. But it's a hard, journey to travel. And I know it because criticism for me is I want to like defend. The first thing I want to do is I get, hold my breath, get defensive, like hold it. Is it true? If it's true, what can I do about it? If not, does it apply? Am I taking it personal? Can I let it go? So that's what I have to offer. Now that I'm retired, I have zero issues. Ha. Now I got issues. I'm done.
Thank you, Paul. What came up when I was hearing you is just to bring this piece in is that it's like in that moment of right before, like you're saying, that anticipation of the criticism is there's like a decision there that we make, right? Conscious or unconsciously, of whether our power is going to be taken from us, right? Where we're feel powerless, or that we're able to continue to just stand in our power, to be in our power in that moment. Like that's something that has been more new for me in those moments of when somebody is about going to say something, or I'm going to read. I sent out an evaluation and it's like, okay, I'm going to read them, and I feel that pit in my stomach of like, what's going to be said. And it's like, wait a minute, like I consciously will say, just be in your power, Teresa. And it's not like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, right? Like what you were talking about, Paul. It's like, no, it's like, can I be in my power so that I can hear everything? So I don't shut off and I can actually hear what's being said, because I don't believe, for the most part, people aren't out necessarily to hurt you. Like they want to help. Of course, maybe depends on who you're dealing with, but for the most part, when we have people in our lives like each other here, like, do we want to hurt each other? No, not necessarily. So yeah, thank you for that. That whole power piece, I think, is really important to see that for ourselves in all kinds of situations that we get into, of where we feel that little twinge of that trigger inside, like, okay, what am I doing with my power right now? What am I doing with it? Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on that before I go to this next question? Because I'm really also curious about this next question that I have up here. Okay, so how do you balance perfectionist tendencies with the acceptance of others' differences? Now, that question is super intentional, and it's intentional because of the differences that are occurring externally for us right now. Now, you can answer that or not, of course, in any way that you'd like. But I know just from talking to different people that there's a lot of things being triggered right now, what is happening for us, even as a country. So, yeah, like, we have this view of how we say this is right, this is the right way to do it, this is wrong. Like, how do you deal with that inside of your body? How do you find that place of where your power is not being taken, and yet you're not wielding power over other people, and you can accept them for their differences? That's not always easy. Anybody want to comment on that? Yeah, Heidi.
Um, I, it may be difficult for some, but I think it all boils down to love one another.
Sure. Absolutely.
Easier said than done, but it is the bottom line for as far as I'm concerned.
So how do you deal with it?
How do I deal with it? Tell me.
I don't know, when you get triggered, or are you triggered?
I don't know if I am so much anymore.
Okay.
I think I am less triggered than I have been in my lifetime, and I
So,
have a tendency to look at the other side
mhm, yeah.
quicker than the judgment. The judgment used to come first,
Uh-huh.
and now I tend to flip to, well, look at yourself first and think about why you're reacting, and that person has just as much goodness or so many issues that I don't have or whatever. But I think that if we just put on a hat of compassion and acceptance and caring and loving, we'd just all be in such a better place.
Okay.
Easier said than done.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that? Whether it's accepting what's happening externally, it could be in your relationships, your personal relationships, how to deal with those differences. Like where are you on that with being able to accept that? Or do you reject it? Yeah, Ruth, thank you.
So like the first question, I was feeling the term ego come for me, as well as the internal judge of myself. And so with the second question, because there's aspects of perfectionism that I am or want to be, again, the term ego comes into play for me. And so I guess the balancing is, again, balancing the right and the wrong has to do with the ego again comes into play. And I'm not necessarily talking about external, however that could be part of it, but just again, these all three questions feel very strongly that the judge and ego play a big part in my sense of a part of the answer to all three questions without being able to put it in any context. But that is what I'm feeling, is that if I'm able to put those things in a better form, and I'm able to work with my own judgment of myself, and I've been better about it with others, and I'm able to put my ego in check or in perspective, that I'm able to balance my perfectionist tendencies with the accepting of others' differences. My first inclination when I read the second question was, I think I do pretty good with that. And then I think of some of the simple things in our home, that if my husband's doing something, I go, and as he will lovingly tell me, I go and take over. And that in a way I take as criticism and feedback that I want to let in. And it's because of my perfectionism and where my ego is, that I know better, or it needs to be done my way. That's another thing that I'm lovingly reminded of frequently. So I guess hopefully I voiced that with some clarity.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ruth, for that. So what came up in that response, what you were saying is, then I'm curious to know where maybe any of you might be in terms of the acceptance of yourself.
Yeah, because as you and I have talked, for me, and I speak for myself, that my ego is my facade that protects me, instead of just being and accepting that I'm worthy to be me, just as I am.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on anything, or even bring in? Go ahead, Teresa.
Okay, I'll try to put this together. I'm currently a full-time special ed teacher, and I've been a teacher for 23 years. And I'm thinking about when I first became a teacher, I went in there like authoritatively, honestly. You're going to do what I say and do it my way, thinking I was doing the right thing. That's the background that I came from. Absolutely. Other people let me know, nope, not doing it. And so I had to figure out within myself, okay, how am I going to navigate being a teacher? Because they're just not, wanting to comply with what I expect them to do. And so it took many years for me to transform and change within myself. And at first I didn't understand, but what was really happening for me was I was being transformed, like I said, but being healed, in my own self when I started to become aware of why I was doing what I was doing, trying to control people, trying to just make things work right. And the things are people, right? Especially kids. And so here I am in year 23, and I'm more confident, more comfortable, more peaceful, but there's always a challenge. And I always go back into inwardly and I go, okay, why is this bothering me? Okay, I need to let this go. Um, thank you, God. This is something I see within myself, something that, thank you for bringing it to my awareness. But the other thing is I also like to think of the bigger picture while I'm going through these triggers, so to speak. And for me as a teacher, I'm like, okay, they get to leave at 3 o'clock. That's my big picture, right? It's like, how important is this really? I was like, okay, they get to go home. And I don't have to, be in charge of that. But really, so I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm learning to find balance through my life through past several years, just letting things go, going inward, and looking at the bigger picture on really what is my purpose here. What is my real focus here? What's my intention? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I'm learning how to take some things off of my plate. It's like that's not for me. It's not going to get me to where I'm supposed to go. So that's my input.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Like, what is the big picture? Pull ourselves out of the microcosm into the macrocosm, right? Less personal because it's not personal in the macrocosm. Yeah, and yeah, just the how we move through that control, the detachment, and as the Buddhist philosophy teaches us all about it, attachment and detachment. Yeah, which is yeah, I think that like, I can relate to that also in my own way, in my own story of where like that's how I thought power was, that meant to have power was to have control,
Mhm,
and during the walk of life and realizing that's not exactly how this all is
mhm.
meant to go down. So yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it also, it feels like a dance, in and out, back and forth, give and take.
Mhm.
There is a lot of movement, spiritual movement, going through these processes. And so I just wanted to add that too.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Yes. Anybody else want to make any last comments before we getting close to our time here together? Anybody else have anything that has come up for them or that any insight that they want to share about themselves or what we've been talking about today about bringing good form, sacredness of life? What would that look like, feel like for you, or what has it? Nope, everybody's good. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, well, as I said, the next class, master class will be on September 28th. It's a Saturday. It'll be at 11 a.m. for an hour. And we'll be talking about Libra, the balance, the scales of balance and justice. And then Scorpio, of course, that's one of my favorites, being the Scorpio water sign. So we'll be talking about that on November 19th on a Saturday at 11 a.m. So, and then I'm just, let me stop the recording here. So